Welcome to our conversation. What starts with a simple fact check about a popular business slogan, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," quickly evolves into a deep dive into the complex interplay between corporate strategy, human psychology, and competitive advantage. In the dialogue that follows, we'll journey from the phrase's surprising origins at Ford Motor Company to its powerful implications in today's tech-driven world. We'll explore why a healthy culture is less about office perks and more about the fundamental principles of game theory, and we'll examine the psychological toll or cognitive dissonance that employees face when a company's stated values don't match its reality. Let's get started. Linda, who said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," and when?
That's a great question, Willie, and the answer is a bit of a surprise. The mantra, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," is almost always attributed to the late management guru Peter Drucker. But the real story is more nuanced. It seems the phrase was actually popularized by a car executive, Mark Fields, who was the president of Ford Motor Company in the mid-2000s. While the idea fits perfectly with Drucker's thinking, the Drucker Institute itself says there's no record of him ever using those exact words. It was Fields who put the slogan on the wall of Ford's War Room and made it a famous principle in modern business. So while the original coiner is a mystery, its popularity is definitely tied to Mark Fields at Ford.
Don't you think it's strange that tech firms still live by this mantra? I mean, are they just ignoring the foundational work of people like Schein, Barney, and Mintzberg? Especially since the phrase comes from a manufacturing company, which you'd think has much less flexibility.
That's a sharp observation, but it's not strange at all. Tech firms embrace this mantra, not in spite of those thinkers, but because it perfectly summarizes their core findings. Tech companies live the consequences of that theory every single day. Unlike manufacturing, tech relies on assets that walk out the door every evening. They're people. A brilliant strategy with a toxic culture will fail to attract or retain the very engineers and designers needed to execute it. This directly reflects what J. Barney's resource-based view argues, that your competitive advantage comes from resources that are rare and hard to imitate. A company's unique culture is probably the most inimitable resource it has. Plus, tech moves at a blistering pace. A 5-year plan can be obsolete in 18 months. Success depends on a culture of innovation and psychological safety, which is the essence of Mintzberg's work on emergent strategy, the idea that real strategy emerges from thousands of daily decisions. The mantra is just a blunt reminder that your goals are meaningless if your cultural norms don't support them.
That's interesting, but what if all company cultures start looking the same? Then there's no competitive advantage. Also, couldn't a culture of self-preservation, where people just want to keep their jobs, end up undermining the official strategy? Think about managers who focus on short-term rewards instead of long-term profits. Don't you see a contradiction there?
You've hit on two brilliant points, but they aren't contradictions. They're critical tests of the idea. First, if culture were easy to copy, it wouldn't be an advantage. We have to distinguish between the surface-level perks, like free lunch and ping-pong tables, and the deep underlying assumptions. The perks are easy to copy. The underlying assumptions, like how failure is treated or how decisions are really made, are nearly impossible to copy. They are built over years. That's why two companies with the same perks can have wildly different results. As for your second point, you're not contradicting the mantra, you're proving it. The phrase is a warning, not a cheer. Culture is always more powerful than strategy, for good or for bad. If your company's stated strategy is long-term value, but its actual culture rewards hitting quarterly numbers above all else, then that culture of short-termism will devour the long-term strategy every single time.
But let's be realistic. Do you really believe that healthy, aligned cultures are mainstream? We see so many reports of employee dissatisfaction. And with the economy being so unstable, aren't people just focused on keeping their jobs no matter the cost?
You're not wrong at all. Healthy, aligned cultures are absolutely not mainstream. They are a rarity, and that's precisely what makes them such a powerful competitive advantage. The widespread data on burnout and quiet quitting doesn't disprove the importance of culture. It shows the symptoms of bad cultures. And you are right, in a tough economy, people will cling to their jobs. But there's a huge difference between an employee who stays and one who is engaged. A bad culture in a tough economy imposes a devastating culture tax on the business. You lose discretionary effort. People do the bare minimum. Collaboration becomes harder. Unhappy employees create unhappy customers. So while people may stay put, the company is getting presence without performance. The culture of fear is still eating the company's potential for breakfast, just in a slower, more corrosive way.
Okay, I see the competitive advantage part. But you're talking about A, trust-based culture, as if a company is a family. Isn't the core of game theory and business strategy that a company should always maximize its own profits? Are you seriously suggesting businesses can reach some kind of perfect Nash equilibrium?
That's a fantastic question. The perceived contradiction disappears when we stop thinking of employment as a single-move game. A business isn't a one-time prisoner's dilemma, where betrayal is the rational choice. The relationship between an employer and an employee is an *iterated prisoner's dilemma. The game repeats every single day. In a repeating game, the winning strategy changes completely. It becomes cooperation and reciprocity. A trust-based culture is just a company being smart enough to institutionalize this winning long-term strategy. It's a calculated decision that the long-term benefits of cooperation, like innovation and low turnover, far outweigh the short-term gains from exploitation. And no, I don't believe in a perfect Nash equilibrium for business. The market is too chaotic and unpredictable. The goal of a great culture isn't to achieve a static perfect state. It's to build a resilient, high-trust system that can adapt to that chaos faster than the competition.
So what you're saying is that a highly individualistic person wouldn't fit in this kind of business structure. But given that American society is highly individualistic and people work in these companies every day, is it reasonable to assume they disregard their own beliefs to adapt? From a psychological standpoint, couldn't this cause a personality disturbance?
It's not that individualists don't fit, it's that their individualism must be channeled. The best cultures don't erase individuality. They create a system where ambitious people achieve personal goals through collective effort, like on a championship basketball team. People don't disregard their core beliefs. Instead, they code switch. They pragmatically adjust their behavior to be effective in a specific environment. The real problem and the psychological stress you mentioned is cognitive dissonance. This happens when there's a huge gap between a person's core values and the behavior their job requires. While it's unlikely to cause a clinical personality disorder, that high dissonance state is a direct path to burnout, anxiety, and profound job dissatisfaction. It's the mental exhaustion of constantly acting against your own identity.
So for my final question, given the high rates of burnout, and that more than half the workforce is looking for another job, does this mean most people are living in a high dissonance environment? Because that finding seems to prove the dark side of culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes, absolutely. The evidence overwhelmingly suggests that a huge portion of the workforce is living in a high dissonance environment. But this data doesn't go against the mantra. It's the most powerful proof of it. The mantra is a warning about culture's power, for good or ill. The high rates of burnout are the real-world result of what happens when a bad culture eats a company's strategy. When a company's stated values, like "we value our people," are totally misaligned with its actual culture, employees are trapped in that gap. The quiet quitting and constant job searching are just people trying to escape that dissonance. So a company's strategy to retain top talent is being devoured every single day by a culture that actively drives that talent away. The data isn't a challenge to the mantra, it's a receipt for its consequences.